Hello and welcome to the 13th video in this beginner's guide to Adobe After Effects. In this tutorial, I will be discussing how to import media files and manage them in Adobe After Effects. So up until this point in the course, we have covered some of the fundamentals in After Effects. This is all in aid to give you some good grounding knowledge of how things work so you feel comfortable with the software and feel less intimidated by it. So now we have lots of fundamentals covered, it's now time to look at how we can use assets and media brought in from other design programs to create in After Effects. Now, After Effects is a really dynamic program that does not just work by itself. As a designer, you will no doubt be creating files in all sorts of programs. You may create initial artwork and compositions in Photoshop, you may create logos and illustrations in Adobe Illustrator, and you may even create 3D models in 3D programs. After Effects allows you to bring in all these files so you can incorporate them into your video and animation sequences. In this video, I'll be discussing how to import media from other programs and manage them in After Effects. So in this video, we'll be covering the following topics: importing media files into After Effects and managing media files in After Effects. So after this video, you will get a better understanding of managing files in After Effects and how this all works, so you will feel much more comfortable moving forward. So let's get into it. So here I am in After Effects and I have a project open here I have prepared earlier, demonstrating a document with lots of different kinds of media content. Now I'm going to use this document to show how media files can be managed and imported into After Effects. So with the project folder open, click into the S2 Essential Practice folder, into folder 13, Importing Files, and open the Importing Files After Effects file, and you'll have the same document I have open here. Now, if you want to follow along with this video, you can open this document I have prepared especially for you. This can be found in the Essential Practice folder in the Project folder. Now you can download the project folder for a small fee. The download link with instructions is in the description. The download folder comes with lots of exercise documents we will be using on this course that have been carefully developed to aid your learning experience. The folder also comes with document resources such as videos, graphics, and images you can use to build your first video presentation from scratch later on in this course. To get the full learning experience, I recommend you get the project folder. Download link with instructions is in the description. So with the project folder open, click into the S2 Essential Practice folder, into folder 13, Importing Files, and open the Importing Files After Effects file, and you'll have the same document I have open here. So first, I want to draw your attention to the project panel over on the left. As covered in a previous episode, all media brought into After Effects is stored in this panel, and it helps to think of this panel like a links basket. So in this instance, I have organized everything contained in this project into two neat folders, Assets and Comps. So first I'm going to toggle down the Assets folder. Upon click, you will see here I have managed this Assets folder into Audio, Images and Video. Here I have categorized the potential media I may bring into my project. So next I'll toggle down Images. Here I have categorized all the potential image media I may bring into my project. Here I have a folder for JPEGs, PNGs, Photoshop artwork, solids and vectors. So I'll toggle down JPEG and I'll toggle down the aquarium folder, and in here we can see the JPEG files I have in this project. Next I'll toggle down the PNG folder, then the fish folder, and in here we can see the PNG files I have. Next I'll toggle down the PS folder, which stands for Photoshop. Then in here I'll toggle down the British flag folder, and in here we can see a lot of Photoshop files. Next I'll toggle down the solids folder, and in here we can see I have a white solid. Next I'll toggle down the vectors folder, and in here we can see I have a few Illustrator files. Next I'll toggle down the video folder, and here we can see two MP4 video files. So I'll toggle all my image folders back up like so, and next I'll toggle down the comps folder. And in here we can see I have all my main comps inside. So here you can see how I have managed the media in my After Effects document. Now this is not done automatically. I had to create this folder structure myself in After Effects. I find that putting everything in its own folder like this in the project panel keeps everything organized and in place, where I know I can access it fast. So with that overview of the project panel, let's see how all this media works in my document. So now I want to draw your attention to the composition panel in the center of the screen and the timeline panel below. So this is a composition with what appears to be an aquarium photo scene. Now, if we carefully look in the timeline panel, we can see quite a few layers here making up this image above. Each layer has an image icon next to it suggesting these are image layers. So from the top to bottom, we have 6 PNG layers and a JPEG at the bottom. If we start to select the fish layers in the timeline, we will see them selected in the composition panel above with the bounding box around. Now, if we press V to activate the selection tool and start to click and drag the fish around, we can see that they are not actually part of the image. These are individual image layers with transparent backgrounds. So if we toggle the visibility of the fish layers off in the timeline panel and the coral layer, we can see that this composition has an image layer at the bottom. So now I'll toggle back the visibility of all the layers above. So how was this composition created in After Effects? Well, all the elements you see in this composition here were not created in After Effects. These cutout fish would have been prepared in a program like Photoshop and brought in. So let's take a look. So in After Effects, if I come down into the timeline panel, select one of the fish layers and put my mouse cursor over the fish layer, I'll right click, I can select an option called Reveal. If I scroll across and select Reveal in Finder, for PC I believe this is Reveal in Explorer, upon click we will see a folder appear showing which file the artwork is from and where it is located on the computer. Now, if you've already downloaded the project folder and are following along with the After Effects document included, you will be taken to the Images folder in the project folder like so. So now we can see on the computer where this image file is located. And we can also see all the other fish cutouts. So let's take a look at this file. So I'll open this fish1.png file in Photoshop. Now to follow along with this video, it would help if you already have Photoshop installed on your computer. I'll be jumping into Photoshop during the course of this video to explain a few things. Though if you don't have Photoshop installed, don't worry too much, you can still follow along and watch. So here we are in Photoshop, and this is the fish artwork file I prepared earlier. Now if you look over in the layers panel, you can see that this is just one layer that has been cut out, and we can see the transparent area around it. So a pretty simple document. Now, if I quickly come back to my folder and select all the other fish layers and open them in Photoshop, we can see that these are all the same, just simple cutouts. Now, I'll jump back into After Effects and I'll do the same with the aquarium image at the bottom. If I right click on this layer and Reveal in Finder, upon click a folder will open showing me what the image is on my computer. Now, in this instance, there are a few other images in this folder. So I'll open this aquarium pic2.jpg in Photoshop, and we can see it's a nice simple image file. Easy. So back in After Effects, this is an example of how an image and some PNG images can work in a composition. So these fish cutouts were first created in Photoshop and brought into After Effects. When these media files are brought into After Effects, they can be placed very easily as layers into a composition like this and animated. Now, I'll be showing you later how this can be done. But before that, I want to show you the next composition example. So now I want to draw your attention to the second composition in my comps folder called Big Ben. And I'll just double click on this to open it. So next we have a completely different example here. Instead of a photographic style image, we have a flat illustration. Now, if we carefully look in the timeline panel, we can see quite a few layers here making up this image above. So this time, in the Layers panel, each layer has an Adobe Illustrator icon next to them. And looking at the layer names, we can also see they have a .i at the end. This is suggesting these are Adobe Illustrator files. So from top to bottom, we have 6 Illustrator layers with a white solid layer at the bottom. If we start to select the Illustrator layers in the timeline, we will see them selected in the composition panel above with the bounding box around them. Now, if we press V to activate the selection tool and start to click and drag the layers around, we can see that there is a layer for each illustration element in this composition. So if we toggle the visibility of all the Illustrator layers off in the timeline panel, we can see that this composition has a white solid layer at the bottom. So I'll toggle back the visibility of the Illustrator layers above and press Command Z to undo all the movements to put them back in their original place. So how was this composition created in After Effects? So all the elements you see in this composition here were not created in After Effects. These illustrations would have been prepared in Adobe Illustrator and brought in. So let's take a look. So I'll come down into the timeline panel, select the Big Ben layer and put my mouse cursor over and right click and select Reveal. I'll scroll across and select Reveal in Finder. For PC, I believe it's Reveal in Explorer. And upon click, we will see a folder appear, showing which file the artwork is from and where it is located on the computer. Here we can also see other Illustrator files. So let's take a look at this. So I'll open this Big Ben file in Illustrator. Now again, it would help if you already have Illustrator installed on your computer. I'll be jumping into Illustrator during the course of this video to explain a few things. Though if you don't have Illustrator installed, don't worry too much, you can still follow along and watch. So here we are in Illustrator, and this is the Big Ben artwork I prepared earlier. This is a piece of vector artwork I carefully created as an asset for this course. And if we click on it, you can see the various parts that make up this illustration. So a pretty simple document. And I'll just jump back into After Effects. So this is an example of how vector files can work in a composition. These illustrations were first created in Illustrator and brought into After Effects. When these media files are brought into After Effects, they can be placed very easily as layers into a composition like this and animated. And again, I'll be showing you later how this can be done. But before that, I want to show you the next composition example. So now I want to draw your attention to the third composition in my comps folder called Squirrel. And I'll just double click on this to open it. So next we have a completely different example here. So I'll make sure to put the time indicator at the start of the timeline and I'll press spacebar to activate preview. So this time we have a simple video file. And I'll press spacebar again to stop. Now if we carefully look in the timeline panel, we can see this time we have one layer. Looking at the layer, we can also see it has a video icon next to it, and it has a .mp4 at the end of the name. This is suggesting that this is a video file. So how was this composition created in After Effects? Well, unlike the other compositions we just saw, this would have been very easy to create. Being a simple video file, we can just drag it into a composition. So let's take a look. So I'll come into the timeline panel, select the squirrel layer and put my mouse cursor over and right click and select Reveal. I'll scroll across and select Reveal in Finder, Explorer for PC, and upon click we will see a folder appear showing which file the video is from and where it is located on the computer. Here we can also see a bunch of other video files, so a pretty simple video document. And I'll just jump back into After Effects. So this is an example of how a video can work in a composition. This video would have been shot and possibly edited and exported in a video editing software and brought into After Effects. When video files are brought into After Effects, they can be placed very easily as layers into a composition like this and edited. So now I want to draw your attention to the fourth composition in my comps folder called British Flag. And I'll just double click on this to open it. So this is a composition with artwork depicting a British flag. Now, if we carefully look at the timeline panel, we can see quite a few layers here making up this image above. This time, each layer has an Adobe Photoshop icon next to them. This is suggesting these are Adobe Photoshop files. If we start to select the Photoshop layers in the timeline, we can see them selected in the composition panel above with the bounding box around them. Now, if we press V to activate the selection tool, we can click and move them around like so. So how was this composition created in After Effects? So this British flag composition here was not created in After Effects. This composition was created entirely in Photoshop and brought in. So let's take a look. So I'll come down into the timeline panel, select the London layer and put my mouse cursor over and right click and select Reveal. If I scroll across and select Reveal in Finder, Explorer for PC, upon click we will see a folder appear showing which file the artwork is from. So on my computer we can see that the entire composition is from this one Photoshop file here. So let's take a look at this. So I'll double click this to open in Adobe Photoshop. So here we are in Photoshop, and this is an artwork file I prepared earlier. Now, if you look over in the layers panel, you can see that this document consists of many layers. And if I toggle the visibility of some of these layers here, you can see that all of the various elements have been created individually. And we even have the type layer at the top. So this document was first created in Photoshop and brought into After Effects in such a way that it has allowed me to work with and potentially animate every layer individually. So that is an overview of how various media types can work in After Effects. Now I'm going to show you how you can import and manage all the media like this in After Effects and place them into compositions. So the first thing we should do here is create a new After Effects document. So I'll come up to File, New, and hit New Project. If it asks me to save changes, on this occasion I'll select Don't Save. Okay, so we are starting from scratch here. So the first thing I'm going to do is create 2 new folders in my project panel. So I'll hit the new folder icon at the bottom of the project panel and name this Assets. I'll click off the folder to deselect it, and then I'll hit the new folder button again, and this time call it Comps. With my 2 folders ready, let's start by creating a composition. So I'll come up to Composition, hit New Composition, and with the settings open, I'll first name it to Comp1 Aquarium. Then I'll hit the preset drop down and select HD TV 1080-25. Make sure the dimensions are set to 1920 by 1080. I'll set the duration to 15 seconds and click OK. Now a new comp will appear in the project panel, and I'm quickly going to drag this into the comps folder. And I'll toggle down my comps folder so I can see it inside. So with my new composition, let's bring in some media. So a real easy way to do this is to drag in from a browser window. So I'll make sure I can see a browser window on top of After Effects, and I'll make sure I have the project folder ready. So I'll start by clicking into the project assets folder, into images, into the JPEG folder, into the location folder, then into the aquarium folder, and I'll click on the aquarium pic2.jpg. and drag it into After Effects into the project panel. Upon release, the image will appear in my project panel. With the new image, I'll drag that into my timeline panel and the image will appear in my composition. But right now it's too big. So with the layer selected, I'll press S on the keyboard, and this will pull up the scale properties under the layer. Here I'll drag the settings down like so it fits the frame nicely. And back in my project folder, I'll come back and click into the PNG folder. I'll click into the fish folder, then I'll click and drag to select all the PNG files, and then drag them straight into the project panel in After Effects. Upon click, they will all appear nice and easy. Okay, so now we have some image files in the project panel. Next, I'll click on the new folder icon at the bottom of the project panel and name this Images. Click and drag this into the Assets folder and click off to deselect. Next, I'll click on the new folder icon at the bottom of the project panel and name this JPEG. Click and drag this into the image folder and click off to deselect. Then I'll click on the new folder icon again and name this PNG. Click and drag this into the image folder and click off to deselect. So I'll toggle down the image folder so I can see my new folders inside, and I'll click the PNG files and drag them into the PNG folder, and then drag the JPEG file into the JPEG folder. So now I can start dragging in my fish cutouts into the composition. I'll click on fish 1 and drag it in like so. If it's too big, I'll click on the bounding box handle and click and drag in while holding shift to maintain the scale. I'll click on fish 2 and drag it in like so. Again, if it's too big, I'll click on a handle on the bounding box and drag in while holding shift to maintain the scale. I'll drag in a few other fish and resize until I have a nice composition like so. Next, I'll click on the coral image and drag it in. So dragging it in, it will appear on top of my other layers. So now I'll be sure to click and drag the layer down in the timeline panel, like so. So that's how we can bring in JPEGs and PNG files. Let's look at how we can bring in some vector files. So let's start by creating a new composition. So I'll come up to Composition, hit New Composition, and with the settings open, I'll first name the comp 2-Big Ben. Then I'll hit the preset drop down and select HD TV 1080-25. I'll make sure the dimensions are set to 1920 by 1080. I'll set the duration to 15 seconds and click OK. Now a new comp will appear in the project panel, and I'm quickly going to drag this into the comps folder. So with my new composition, let's bring in some media. So I'll make sure I can see the browser window on top of After Effects again, and back into my project folder, I'll come back to Images, this time into the AI folder, then into the Buildings folder, and I'll click on the BigBen.ai and drag it into After Effects into the project panel. I'll come back to the folder and this time click and drag the Buildings left file in as well. Back in the project folder, I'll come back to the AI folder, then into the Objects folder, then into the Clouds folder, and I'll drag in Clouds 1, 3, and 5. So now we have a new kind of image file. So I'll hit the New Folder icon at the bottom of the project panel. I'll name this Vectors and drag it into the Images folder. And next, I'll drag the new Illustrator files into this new Vector folder. So right now, my composition background is black. So in the Timeline panel, over on the left, I'll right-click, select New at the top, and hit Solid. I'll make sure the solid is white and the same size as the composition, 1920 by 1080, and click OK. Upon click, we will see a new white solid layer in the Timeline panel, and also a new Solids folder will appear in the project panel. So I'll quickly drag the Solids folder into the Images folder as well. So next, I'll click and drag the Big Ben vector into the composition like so. Upon release, we will also see the layer present in the Timeline panel. But right now it looks too small. So I'll click on a handle on the bounding box and click and drag out while holding Shift to maintain the proportions. Easy. So next, I'll drag in the Building Horizon left vector and again resize it and position. This time, I'll press T on the keyboard to reveal the opacity options for the layer. I'll drag this down to 20% and I'll come and click the layer and drag it under Big Ben. Next, with the layer selected, I'll press Command D on Mac or Control D on PC to duplicate the layer and move it across like so. Easy. So next, I'll drag in Clouds 1, 3, and 5. If I select the top cloud layer, I'll press and hold Shift, I can select the bottom cloud layer, and with them all selected, I can move them down together under the Big Ben layer like so. And if I press T on the keyboard, I can activate the opacity options for each layer at the same time. Then I'll click and drag on one of the properties down to 30%, and that will apply it to them all. Next, I'll press Command A on Mac or Control A on PC to select all the layers, then press U to collapse the layer properties so I can see just the layer bars in the Timeline panel. Next, I'll scale up each cloud using the same technique as earlier. I'll select the layer to see the handles. I'll click on a handle and drag out while holding Shift to maintain the proportions and reposition like so. Now, I'll just toggle up all the image folders in the project panel as I don't need to see them right now. So that's how we can bring in vector files. Let's look at how we can bring in some video files. So let's start by creating a new composition. So I'll come up to Composition, hit New Composition. With the setting open at the top, I'll first name the comp 3-squirrel. Then I'll hit the preset drop down and select HDTV 1080-25. I'll make sure the dimensions are set to 1920 by 1080. The duration is set to 15 seconds and click OK. A new comp will appear in the project panel and I'm quickly going to drag this into the comps folder. So with my new composition, let's bring in some video. So I'll make sure I can see a browser window on top of After Effects, and back in my project folder, I'll come back into the project assets folder, this time into the video folder, then into the Hyde Park folder, then into the wildlife folder, and I'll click on the squirrel.mp4 and drag it into After Effects into the project panel. So now we have a new kind of file. So I'll hit the new folder icon at the bottom of the project panel. I'll name this video and drag it into the assets folder, and now drag the new video file into the video folder. Easy. So right now my composition background is black, but that doesn't matter because now I'm going to drag my video into the timeline like so to fill the frame. Upon release, we will also see the layer present in the timeline panel. So importing and placing video is really easy. Let's now look at the last example, how we can bring in a Photoshop composition. So this is now slightly different than before. Earlier, we created a new composition ready to place in our media. So this time, I'm going to come into the project panel and double click into the empty space below the folders. Upon click, this will bring up a search window asking what we want to place into After Effects. So I'll navigate to the project folder, into the project assets folder, into the images folder, into the PS folder, and I'll click on the britishflag.psd and click OK. Now upon click, you will see a menu box open. This is asking how you would like to import the file. Now, because After Effects recognizes this file as a Photoshop file with lots of layers inside, here you will have some options to select. Now we want this file to be placed into After Effects with the option to access each layer. So we will need to click on the drop down for Import Kind, select Composition-Retain Layer Sizes. For this layer option, make sure you have Editable Layers selected and click OK. Now upon click, you will see a new composition appear in the project panel. So first, I am quickly going to drag this into the comps folder. With it selected, I'll press enter on the keyboard to rename the comp, and in this instance, I'll just put a 4- before the name. Now I'll double click on the new comp to open it. So here we are, and we can see After Effects has generated our composition. If we look on each layer, we can see we have each segment as an individual layer. Perfect. What you may also notice is that as well as the individual colored shapes that make up this flag, we also have a type layer at the top. Right now, this is just a static type layer like the rest. Now this layer was created in the Photoshop artwork created outside After Effects. But what if we wanted to edit this type? Change the size or the typeface perhaps? Well, After Effects recognizes this is a type layer. With the type layer selected, if we right click and select Create, then scroll across and click Convert to Editable Type, upon click we will see the type layer change from the Photoshop icon to a type icon. Now we can double click on this type layer and edit. Easy. So this is one example of how flexible After Effects can be with imported files. Now if we look over in the project panel, we will now see a new folder called British Flag Layers. If we toggle this down, we can see we have some Photoshop layers. So now we have a new kind of file. So I'll click off the folder to deselect, and I'll hit the new folder icon at the bottom of the project panel. I'll name this PS Artwork and drag it into the Images folder. Now I'll click the British Flag Layers folder and drag it into the PS Artwork folder. Easy. So that is how to import artwork assets prepared in other programs in After Effects. Now there is one more thing you should really know about. As well as importing files from Illustrator and Photoshop, you can actually import other After Effects projects you have worked on into your document. Now, let's say you have spent a lot of time working on one particular After Effects project, and then you realize you want to get some work you have done in another document. In After Effects, it's not particularly easy to copy content from one After Effects document into another. So what we can do is simply import an After Effects document into another to access all the work. So let's see how this works. So I'll come over to the project panel and double click into the grey space. Upon click, we will get the browser asking us to navigate to the file we want to import. So I'll navigate to the project folder, click into the S2 Essential Practice folder, into folder 13, Importing Files, and here we have another After Effects document called Under the Sea. This is a document I have prepared earlier that has the same structure and similar contents to what we have just created here. So I'll click on that and click Open. Upon click, we will now see a Under the Sea folder in the project panel. And if we toggle this folder down, inside we will see the same folders as we have just created in this file. In the Assets folder, we will have images and videos, and in the Comps folder, we will have comps created in a previous file, which we can now open and integrate into this project. So keep in mind, if you ever have multiple After Effects files and want to bring them into one, you can easily import After Effects files into other After Effects files like this. So that is a brief introduction on how to import various media into After Effects, how to manage, organize and place them into your compositions. Now, we are going to be doing more and more of this as we move on and progress in this course. So it's important to emphasize to you as a beginner in After Effects how important it is to organize your media well in your project panel with folders. So now we have covered how to create using media brought into After Effects. Let's look at a way we can be creative in After Effects. As you create your video sequences, you will also find yourself using shape elements created in After Effects. Now, there are lots of reasons you would build shapes in After Effects. Shapes can be used to add visual elements to your composition. They can give us a basis to build our artwork, and they can be used to create masks, which we will be learning about later in the course. In the next video, we are going to look at how we can create and use shapes in After Effects. So see you in the next video.